My name is Maud. I'm 58 years old. I'm a widow. And to this day I ask myself, what leads a man to hide a house from his own wife for 24 years of marriage? Not a beach house, not a forgotten heritage, but a secret house, with a locked door, a hidden address, and a single warning. Never go there. It may seem like an exaggeration, I know. But what would you do if the person who slept next to you for more than 2 decades looked you in the eye on your deathbed and say, "Do you promise you'll never open that door?" That's exactly what David asked me for. And I, even without understanding, promised. For 2 years I kept that promise. I kept it like someone who keeps an engagement ring or an old photograph, with respect, with pain, but silence weighs heavily. And when the lawyer handed me a letter with a key inside, I knew the time had come. If you've ever suspected that someone you loved has hidden something from you, this video is for you. Because what I found inside that house took me off the ground, and it showed me that no one really knows who sleeps next to me. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. The key I received from the lawyer did not just open a wooden door. It opened up a life that I didn't know existed. When I crossed that doorstep, I thought I would find dust, old furniture, and maybe a memory or two from the past. But no, what I found was a living house, breathing secrets. It was like entering a movie that I didn't participate in, with scenes that involved me, but that I had never lived. And at the center of it all, a woman. It was in paintings, in letters, in recordings. It was as if that house had been made for her. And the most disturbing thing, that woman, it was me. If you've ever had the feeling that you didn't know everything about someone you loved, that there were chapters of the story that were hidden from you, then maybe you understand what I felt. Before continuing, I wanted to ask you something simple. If this story has already touched your heart in any way, leave your like, subscribe here to the channel. It's not out of vanity, it's just because telling it hurts. And knowing that there are people on the other side listening to me with affection, it gives me the courage to continue. What I am going to tell you now happened a few days after the burial. The house was silent. Those flowers that the neighbors brought were already withering on the porch, and I felt like that too. No color, no perfume, frozen in time. David had left abruptly. A stroke. No farewell. No time. And even after everything, even with my heart in pieces, I still heard his voice repeating in my ear, "Maud, never go there. Promise me." And I promised. But that day, the lawyer appeared with a small, brown leather briefcase and a look that said more than he dared to say. He sat down in front of me, took a deep breath, and placed on the table a folded scripture, an ancient bronze key, and a letter. I recognized the lyrics as soon as I saw it. It was David's. His handwriting was firm, rounded, as if every word had been thought out carefully. The letter was not long, but it hurt as if it were infinite. "Maud, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer there. And now you can go to the house. You need to go. Because only there will you understand everything. Forgive me for hiding. But it was never for lack of love. That took me apart. 24 years of marriage. And I never knew he had another property. Never. And what hurt me the most was not the secret itself, but the reason. Why hide? Why prohibit it? And why now send me there as if it were a gift? I took the key. It had a number engraved, 27A, and a flower drawn on the opposite side. A flower that I knew. It was a trillium, typical of the state of Vermont. At the time, my mind went far. I remembered a trip we took in the early 2000s, where he took me to see these flowers in an open field. He said he loved seeing them bloom after the snow. But now it seemed he had built a life hidden, right there. I began to investigate the documents. The property was registered in Middlebury, a small town among the mountains of Vermont. The deed had been in David's name for 6 years. 6 years. And he never commented a word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with the letter in my lap, the key in my hand, and my head full of memories that suddenly began to seem distant, almost fake. Was the man who shared life with me really who I thought? Or was I just a part of a much larger life, of which he only showed me a piece? No, the pain of losing someone is already great. But the pain of discovering that this person had secrets, this is an even lonelier pain. Pause in the narrative. Moment of reflection. Sometimes we think we know someone entirely, but all it takes is a letter, an unspoken word, an old key, and everything changes. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever had the impression that you lived with someone for years and still didn't know everything about them? If you've experienced something like this, write here in the comments, "I've lived it," or "It's true." I really want to know if anyone on the other side understands me. The following week, I booked a car, packed some clothes, and put the key in my coat pocket. I didn't tell anyone, not even for my daughter Claire. I thought she would discourage me, or worse, to say that it didn't matter. But it mattered. I needed to go. The road to Vermont was long, more than 5 hours of travel, but it was as if I crossed an entire continent inside me. With every kilometer, I moved away from Maud, who trusted everything, and I approached a version of myself that distrusted even the flowers that David said he loved. I arrived in Middlebury with the end of winter beating on the trees. The city was small, cold, but it had a certain old charm. I followed the lawyer's instructions to a gravel road called Ash Hollow Road. The GPS didn't even recognize it properly. It was as if that place had been erased from the map on purpose. At the end of the road, after miles of forest and trampled snow, I spotted a wooden gate. On it, a cast iron sign, Crescent Pines. I stopped the car. I took a deep breath. The heart seemed to want to come out of the throat. I took the key in my pocket. As I turned it at the gate, I felt the weight of iron and time. A snap, and he opened up. What I saw inside, it was as if I had passed through a mirror. The house was not a rustic cabin as I had imagined. It was not a simple retreat. It was a Victorian-style mansion, restored to perfection. Every detail seemed to have been thought out with care, but not by me. I've never been there. The garden was clean. There were fresh flowers in the vases, clean curtains on the windows, and a strange feeling that someone still lived there. I climbed the 3 steps of the balcony with the key shaking in my hand. The handle was golden. The glass of the door reflected my aged face, tired, but full of questions. I put the key, turned. The lock gave way, and then I opened the door. But I wasn't prepared for what I found. What would you do if you found out that during all the years you slept with someone, that person lived a lifetime? Where were you the main piece, but were never invited in? That's what I'm going to tell you in the next part. Because what was in that room? It took me off the ground. The door opened slowly, without creaking, as if it were being opened every day. And maybe he was. The smell wasn't of mold or abandonment. It was a soft scent of lavender, the same one I used to spray on the sheets at home. The windows were clean, the floor waxed, and there, before my weary eyes, was an entire home that was never mine. The entrance hall had an antique table with a vase of white orchids, fresh, alive. My heart raced. I almost asked out loud, "Is anyone there?" But I didn't have the courage. I took a few steps, observing everything. The floral wallpaper, the linen curtains, the paintings on the walls, and that's when I felt the first sting in my chest. In the frames, there were paintings that reminded me of myself. Not exactly portraits, but female figures with features that seemed familiar to me. A woman with her hair tied up with a blue ribbon, like I used to wear in the 90s. Another, sitting in front of a fireplace, with an open book on her lap, wearing a robe just like mine. But I never posed for any frame. Never. And yet, I was there, as if each room kept a version of me that I never knew. I walked across the room with my feet almost floating. At the bottom, a wooden staircase led upstairs. Next to it, a double door with beveled glass gave access to a library. Entered. There was an armchair with a folded blanket, books with bookmarks, a cup resting on a saucer, empty but clean, as if someone had left there a few minutes ago. I felt a shiver. The house was alive. It breathed memories that I never lived. My memories, made without me. I walked to the main shelf, where I found a note on a dark wooden table. It was handwritten, in the same handwriting as David. "When you're ready, press play." Next to it, a closed laptop. The device was loaded, as if someone had left everything prepared. My hands trembled. I hesitated. I took a deep breath and opened the lid. The screen lit up. There was a single video file named "To Maud." Clicked, and there he was. David. Younger than in recent years, probably about 5 years before he died. He was sitting in exactly the same armchair in the library, smiling tenderly. "Maud, if you've made it this far, it's because the moment has finally come. You must be confused, angry, maybe sad, but I ask you, listen to me until the end. Everything that is in this house, it was made by you, and for you. My tears began to fall without me noticing. David spoke in a calm, confessional tone, almost as if we were having breakfast together. He said that this house was an old project, which he started building after a very difficult period between us, when I lost my mother, and I went into a deep mourning that distanced me from everything. He said he wanted to create a place where he could keep the things he loved most about me, without me having to carry the weight of it. It's not a betrayal. It never was. It is a tribute, a refuge, an altar. I wanted to believe it, but something was still out of place. Why hide? Why only tell me after death? Why make it a secret, if it was something so beautiful? David didn't explain everything in that video. I just said there was more, and that I would need to explore, calmly, in my own time. You'll understand, Maud, and when you understand, you will forgive me. The screen went dark. I closed the laptop with shaky hands. I sat in the armchair. I stayed there for a while, listening to the silence of the house. A silence that was not empty. It was full of layers. Each wall seemed to want to tell me something. Each object, a clue. I didn't know whether to cry out of nostalgia or confusion, but one thing I knew. That house held something that had not yet been said. Something bigger than paintings, letters, or videos. Something that could change what I thought about the man I lived with for almost half my life. And in the middle of it all, a doubt began to grow. If this house was my tribute, so why did it seem at all times to have been shared with anyone else? Who else was there before me? And what, exactly, was David still trying to show me? I stood there, sitting in the armchair, embraced by the thick fabric arms and the weight of what I had just watched. The image of David, younger, smiling with that calm air of someone who always seemed to know more than he said. It gave me a lump in my throat. It was him, but it was someone else. A David who lived something I was completely unaware of, and who now seemed willing to guide me down a trail of backward truths. When he said, "You'll understand, Maud," I felt that there was still much more hidden within those walls than I imagined. The first thing that caught my attention was the corner of the bookcase, where there was a small wooden box with bronze hinges. Inside it, a remote control and a printed list. Hundreds of videos, all numbered with specific dates. Each issue corresponded to a year, an event, a day, and they were all there, stored on a server, with access on their own laptop. It was as if he had spent the last few years organizing our history from his point of view, or rather, preparing a map so that I, after he was gone, would find a way back to him. I started with video number 1. The image was shaky, the camera badly positioned, but it was David, sitting on the bench on the porch of the house. Behind him, the still bare winter forest. "This is the beginning," he would say. "I bought the house today. Maud doesn't know yet, and you may never know. But I'm doing it because I need to, because there's something inside of me that I can't speak. Just build." Those words cut me off in a way I can't explain. I felt excluded, as if he had lived this gesture of love, if that was what it was, alone, in silence, without allowing myself to participate, but at the same time, preparing to inherit everything, as if I knew that only after his death would I be able to see. I kept watching, one video at a time. He spoke of me with such tenderness. He told me about details that I didn't even remember. Once, in 2004, when we had a nasty argument and I cried all night in the guest room, he said that it was on that day that he decided to create the first room in the house, the room with the window to the east, where the sun would always rise, so that she never forgets that the day always comes back, he said. In another video, he showed the garden being planted with flowers that only bloom at the end of winter. "She's going to come here after I die, and I want her to see it blossoming as a fresh start." But among the sweet videos, others began to emerge, more obscure, quieter. In one of them, he enters a locked room, which I have not yet found inside the house. The camera doesn't show much, just his face. Seriously, anguished. I still don't have the courage to tell her that, but I'll leave everything on record. When it gets to that point, maybe it'll be ready. I closed the laptop, the heart racing, the short breathing. What room was that? What was inside? And why was he so hesitant to show me? I got up, Walked around the house trying to find a locked door, a hidden entrance. There were many doors, all open, except one, at the end of the second-floor corridor. A dark door with no visible handle, just a small hole in the center. It looked like a special lock. I tried to fit the entry key, but it didn't fit. I stared at that door as if looking at a covered mirror. I was sure it was there, but it was not the time. I went downstairs, had some tea that I found in the kitchen. Everything still in perfect condition. Refrigerator on, dishes clean. It seemed that someone had lived there until yesterday, and maybe he did. I went back to the library and looked for more clues. That's when I found a brown envelope, taped under the lid of the table. Inside it, only a note. When you get to video 247, go back to that door. The number was etched in my mind as a warning, a milestone. But I was still at number 9. I looked at the list of videos. 247 would be in a while. I would have to walk through everything first. Listen, watch, digest. It was like a journey that he had drawn with precision, and I, obeying every step. But one thing kept in my head. Why do all this in secret? Why so much mystery if the purpose was love? Or wasn't that the only purpose? Was there anyone else involved in this story? I don't know if it was fatigue or the weight of the silence of the house. But that night, I slept in the library armchair with the laptop on my lap, and I dreamed of the sound of a door opening behind me. When I turned around, I saw a woman looking me in the eyes. She was young, very young. But the eyes, they were the same as mine. Who was she? And why was he in that house? This, I only began to understand when I found the red mural upstairs, and the truth began to appear on the walls. I slowly climbed the stairs of that house, guided by an intuition that even I didn't know where it came from. Each step seemed to hold a secret, an invented memory, a part of me that I never knew. When I reached the end of the hallway, I entered a room that had seemed closed for a long time, even though it was clean like the rest of the house. The tall windows let the late afternoon light enter a yellowish beam, which gently touched a red wall, and that's where I stopped. On that wall was an entire mural, hand-painted, a woman in the center, surrounded by white and lilac orchids. Her hair was tied with a blue ribbon. Her dress was beige, loose. Her eyes, they were mine. There was no denying it. That woman was me, in another version, in another time, but I knew. I approached carefully, as if I didn't want to wake up a past that sleeps lightly. Just below the painting, there was a small golden plaque, with a name I had never heard, Legrand, and a title, Winter Orchid. Legrand. I started to look at the other walls of the room, and little by little, everything was revealed. Framed paintings, graphite studies, delicate watercolors. They all had women who looked like me in different settings, sitting by a lake, picking apples, sewing a blue cushion, just like the one in our reading chair at home, and all, signed by that name, Legrand. I went to a small bookshelf in the corner and found folders, documents from exhibitions in New York, letters exchanged with galleries, invoices, sales receipts. David's real name was nowhere to be seen. He had used that pseudonym, an artistic alter ego, a parallel life he never mentioned. My chest tightened in a way that made me sit right there, on the cold floor of light wood. David painted. David expounded. David sold works with my faces, and I never knew. I never heard him talk about it even in our most intimate moments. He talked about politics, books, recipes, childhood in Vermont, but he never even let slip that he spent nights painting, and here was proof that he had been doing this for years. I stared at one of the smaller paintings, a woman with her back turned, looking out the window. The frame was simple, oak. The signature underneath was barely noticeable, but the title was there, handwritten, Maud in Silence. My eyes filled with tears, because at that moment, all I felt was exactly that, silence. A silence full of images that did not consult me, a beauty built on my absence. And a question came to me that cut me inside. This was all love. Or was it selfishness? Because at the same time that I felt honored, I also felt used, designed, painted, idealized, but never asked. I was married to him for 24 years. We slept side by side. We grow old together. And even so, he kept me in a frame. He immortalized me without letting me know. I tried not to judge. I tried to remember that people love the way they know how. but at that time, hurt. You know, I'm here opening my heart, telling my story with all the open wounds. If you are listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's just a way of saying that you're here with me, that this story touched you too. I still have a lot of things in store to tell you. I took a deep breath, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and continued exploring the room. Behind an old screen, I found a kind of built-in cabinet. Inside, more paintings, still unframed, rolls of canvas, used brushes, palettes with dry paint. It was his studio, a piece of the world where he existed without me. And on the floor, there was a locked wooden box with a small combination padlock, 3 digits. I tried some numbers that came to mind. Our wedding anniversary, his birth date, the day we met. Nothing. Until I remembered an old conversation. Once, we were in the car coming back from a trip, and I asked him what number he liked the most. He said 317, without thinking. It's the date of the middle of nowhere, he said. I laughed and never understood. I tried 317. Click. The box opened. Inside, there was a videotape, one of those old ones, and a dark blue envelope with my name on it. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter was short. Maud, if you've come this far, it's because you've already seen the paintings. You already know about Legrand. And maybe you're feeling too many things at once. But there's still something you need to see. The tape is old. Use the library device. I only ask you one thing. See to the end. I closed the letter slowly. I picked up the tape. I went back to the library, my heart racing. I placed the tape in the video device that was embedded behind one of the bookshelves. The image appeared shaky, as if it were a domestic recording from the 90s. And what I saw, it wasn't David. It was a woman, young, alone, sitting in that same armchair where I had slept the night before. She looked at the camera, and he said something that made me lose my breath. If you're watching this, it's because he never told you about me. Who was she? And why did she seem so sure that one day I would find her? I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the old television screen with the tape still playing in slow motion, as if my mind refused to process what I had just heard. The woman, young, with a calm voice, a familiar face in a way that bothered me, had said those words as if she knows she is touching a wound that doesn't even exist yet, but that will hurt when it opens. If you're watching this, it's because he never told you about me. And then the tape cut to static. No name, no explanation, no outcome. Just that. A warning. A presence. I spent the night awake. I lay down on the upstairs bed, which had clean sheets and an embroidered quilt as if someone was waiting for me. But the pillow smelled of lost time, and all I could think was, who was that woman, and why did she seem to know so much? While I, who lived 24 years with him, knew almost nothing. The next day, while I was having a warm coffee on the porch of the house, I heard the sound of footsteps in the gravel. I looked through the fence and saw a gentleman approaching slowly, with a felt hat and a cane. He was about 80 years old, with blue eyes and a curious expression. He raised his hand and said, "I thought it was you." I was silent for a moment, trying to understand. He climbed the 3 steps with effort and held out his hand. "Henry Braddock, neighbor of the house next door. I lived here for 50 years. You're Maud, aren't you?" I nodded, still not understanding. "David talked a lot about you," he continued with a tired smile. "You know, he came here all the time in the last few years. I spent whole weeks here, sometimes alone, sometimes with company." I froze. Company? Henry sat in the chair on the porch as if it were an ancient ritual. A girl. Young. He must have been in his early 20s. Brown hair, long, light skin. I can't say, but she looked like you. The first time I saw it, I even thought it was your daughter. My stomach turned. "What do you mean, looks like me?" He shrugged. The eyes, the way he walks, the hair pulled back. One day, I joked with David, I said, "Did you bring the young Maud here?" And he laughed. But then it got serious. He said he was someone important. I wanted to ask more, but my mouth froze. The same feeling as when we see the car braking too late on the corner. Henry continued, as if he did not notice the abyss he digs with light words. They rarely went out. They stayed more inside. Sometimes he played the piano at night. I listened to it from here. It was beautiful. Different from him, right? I never imagined that David was a man of arts. I nodded, but inside, everything broke. After some time, he stood up, adjusted his hat, and said, I just wanted to welcome you. If you need sugar or company, I'm next door. And, sorry if I said too much." He left, and I stood there, with the cup still in my hand, cold. The feeling was of floating inside a story that was never mine, but that had my face stamped on all the walls. I went back inside the house and turned the laptop back on. I tried to find another video that explained that woman, but all the files were organized by number, not by theme, and the 247, it was still far away. I opened a desk drawer in the library, rummaged through old papers, receipts, drafts of letters. That's when I found a folded sheet of paper with something handwritten by David. If she gets to video 198, maybe she'll understand. I kept that number as if it were a code for the air I needed to breathe. But before that, something caught my attention. Behind the sheet was a smaller, almost scribbled note. "Don't tell about Elle until Maud is strong enough." Elle, the woman in the tape? I started walking around the house looking for anything with that initial. I rummaged through the bookshelves, the studio closet, until I found a picture frame facing down, behind some books. It was an old photo, worn at the edges, and there, in the center, were David and she, the young woman, the same woman from the tape. They were sitting in the garden of the house, laughing, she in a light blue dress, he with his hair tousled by the wind. Among them, an orchid, and behind, the same painting that was on the wall of the hall. I turned the photo over with trembling hands. On the back, only 2 letters, D+L. I leaned on the table, because my legs threatened to abandon me. The world turned slowly, like when we receive news that changes everything. Daughter? Lover? Muse? Part of me was screaming to get out of there. Another part wanted to dive even deeper, because one thing was certain, that woman was not a coincidence. She was part of history, from my story. But who was Ellie? And why did she know that one day I would find her? The master bedroom was at the end of the hallway, with double doors and a beige linen bedspread on the bed, the kind that looks like it has never been used, but was still perfectly arranged, as if someone was waiting for a visitor who never came. I entered with slow steps. The light coming in through the window illuminated dust particles suspended in the air, and I felt like I was invading something sacred, or maybe something that was already mine, but only now was I allowed to play. Next to the bed was a chest of drawers with wide drawers. I opened the first one and saw folded towels. The second, papers, loose drafts, electricity bills, unimportant notes. But in the third, there it was, a light wooden box with a ribbon of faded blue fabric. I opened slowly, and what I found took my breath away. Dozens of letters, all handwritten, in David's firm handwriting, each with a date in the upper corner. Almost all of them began with the same name, Dear Maud. My fingers touched the envelopes as if finding a secret version of herself. I read the first one. It was from 2017. He talked about a night when I got sick and had to sleep in the hospital. "I saw you sleep in that uncomfortable armchair, and I felt like I didn't deserve you," he said. The second was from 2019, when we lost our dog, Max. He wrote, "You became strong on the outside, but I know that on the inside something broke. There were love letters. Letters of guilt. Letters asking for forgiveness for small things, such as forgetting our engagement anniversary, or for not having fixed the gate in the fall. But what touched me most was the fact that he never gave me any of them. He wrote, but never sent it, as if he were talking to me, only from a distance. I kept reading one by one. Some made me smile, others made me sob, but it was at the bottom of the box, underneath everything, that I found the strangest letter. It was the only one that had no addressee, no Dear Maud, no name, just the date, 2 months before the stroke. The handwriting was more shaky, as if his hand was already starting to fail. And the content? Well, this one made me fall apart. He began by saying that he felt time shortening, that he sensed death hovering, although the exams said otherwise. He said that there was something he had carried for decades, something that he tried to transform into beauty, into art, but that still weighed like lead inside his chest. If I leave before telling, maybe it's cowardice, but if I count, I can lose her forever. Maud is the only truth I've had in my life, but it's also the only one that I never had the courage to show in its entirety. The letter followed an almost confessional tone. He talked about the fear of hurting me, about the guilt of having lived a life halfway, about a secret that has a face, a name, and a story. but it didn't say what it was. The letter ended abruptly. No farewell, no subscription. I curled up in the corner of the bed, letter pressed to my chest. The tears came down hot, as if each word had opened a new cut in me. He loved me, I know, but it also hid me. It kept me out of a part of it that seemed to be essential. And at that moment, sitting there with all those letters that never reached me, I understood something that perhaps only time can teach. Sometimes, we don't know the other, because the other doesn't know who they are completely. But what scared me the most, this truth that he cited in the letter without an addressee, seemed to be getting closer and closer, and his fear, it seemed to be the same that was beginning to grow inside me. You know, there are stories that only reveal what they are when we get to the end, and that's why, if you're here listening to me, stay with me until the end, because what lies ahead, it's what changes everything. I closed the box with trembling hands. I put it back on the dresser, but this time on top, as if it deserved to be seen, not hidden. I looked around. The whole house seemed to have stopped breathing. It was as if she herself was waiting for me to take the next step. It was then that I heard a noise coming from downstairs. Light steps. I got up slowly, heart racing, and went to the hallway. The stairs were empty. I went down one step, then another, and it was in the entrance room that I saw it. The door, the one that was previously locked without a handle. Now it was ajar. Who opened it? Or worse, what was inside? The half-open door called me like an old whisper, one of those that we hear in the depths of our souls, but pretend that it is not with us. I descended the last few steps with my heart racing, as if I were 20 years old again, and about to discover what I should never have. The room was silent. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the air. The door, previously locked, now seemed to invite me to cross a line. But curiously, it was not through her that I entered at that moment, because next to the door, on a small corner table, there was something that I had not seen before, a white envelope sealed with red wax. It was intact, heavy, my handwritten name, Maud Eleanor Hartley. My fingers hesitated. I broke the seal carefully. Inside, I found papers in order, stapled and numbered, bank documents, statements, records of financial transactions that went back almost 7 years. Everything is very well organized. Each page, a stab. David had withdrawn money from our joint accounts that we opened together, where I deposited my retirement, where we kept our plans. He transferred significant amounts to accounts in the name of a company called Legrand Studio LLC. At first I thought it was some mistake, but the more I read, the clearer it became. David diverted resources from our assets to finance that house, that parallel life. He took it from us, to feed a secret. My heart was quiet. It didn't accelerate. It didn't hit hard. Was quiet, as if I had tired of hurting. I sat on the couch with the papers on my lap. The betrayal was not the money. It never was. I never cared about luxury, about possessions. I've always been simple. The gesture hurt me. The secret. The choice. He didn't trust me. And that for me was the real loss. I closed my eyes for a few minutes. I thought of all the nights I cooked for both of us, with my apron smeared with flour and tired hands, and he would say, "You're my home." And now I found out that he had built another home. Alone. With our money. No. There are times in life when disappointment doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence. A heavy silence, which sits on our chest and does not come out. And if you've ever felt that pain without scandal, that quiet wound, let me know in the comments. He just writes, "I understand you," or "I know how it is," because it is at these times that we need to know that we are not alone in the world. I folded the papers and put them back in the envelope, carefully. It wasn't anger that I felt. It was a different kind of grief. A mourning for a truth that I thought I had, but that never existed. But even so, there was something in me that wouldn't break. Something that stood up. A new will. Not revenge, but to know. To understand until the end. Because if he built all this hidden, if he moved the world to keep this secret standing, then something much greater was still there. And it was mine. That house was now mine. This story, also. I got up slowly, dried my face, and walked back to the half-open door, the one that was previously locked. I stopped in front of her. Now I was more than afraid. I had questions, and a right that no one else could deny me. I touched the doorknob and pushed it away. The door gave way, revealing a narrow, dark corridor with soft light coming from the end, and it was there, at the end of that corridor, that I saw the frame of a new truth form. What was behind that last door? It was something he never had the courage to tell me in life, but he prepared it for me to know. And what I discovered there, it wasn't about money. It was about who he was before me, and who I was, without knowing it. I called Claire in the late afternoon, after hours of silence with the house. I sat on the porch, with the document still on the next table, the sun hiding behind the bare trees, and the Vermont wind cutting lightly through the collar of my coat. I needed to hear my daughter's voice. I needed to feel some anchor, some hand outstretched in the midst of the confusion that spread inside me like a dense fog. The phone rang 4 times until she answered. "Hi, Mom. Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, and in the firmest voice I could, I began to count. I told him about the letter, the paintings, the videos, the name Legrand, the woman in the video, the movement in the accounts. I told everything as if I were undressing in the middle of the public square. Each word came out with effort, but also with relief. Silence on the other side. Then Claire sighed. "Mom, look, I know that all this must be very intense for you, but maybe you're exaggerating a little." The phrase fell like a stone inside me. "Exaggerating?" I asked. "Mom, you've always been so sensitive. I know you're alone right now, dealing with grief, but digging up old secrets won't help you. Maybe it's better. Sell that house. Forget about it all." I felt my hands tremble. "Do you think I should pretend that none of this exists? That these letters, these videos, this woman, that this is what? I don't know. But you don't know either, Mom. Maybe Dad had his reasons. Maybe he was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Of the truth?" Claire was silent for a few seconds. "I just think you're clinging to things that maybe they don't mean as much as you think." Her words did not come with malice, but they hurt, because they came with a practical coldness of someone who sees the world in black and white, of those who do not understand that there are truths that do not fit in spreadsheets or in quick judgments. I kept silent. "Mom," she said softer, "I love you, but take care of your head, okay? If you need it, I can help you organize the sale of the house. We can end this calmly." "Claire, what's wrong?" "Nothing." I hung up before the pain overflowed through my voice. I stood there on the porch, alone with my phone on my lap, looking at the sky that was beginning to darken. My daughter, my only daughter. I created it with so much care, so many nights awake, so much advice, so many, "Don't do that, honey," so many, "Take this soup that's hot." And now, she looked at me as an old, fragile, exaggerated woman. He didn't listen to me. He didn't want to know. And there, at that moment, I realized that loneliness has degrees, and that was the deepest of all, being alive, surrounded by evidence, by questions, and being ignored by those you love the most. I cried, not like crying in movies, with sobs and hands on your face. I cried silently, with eyes open, the kind of crying that flows slowly, without noise, but takes with it pieces of what we were. I entered the house and closed the door. The wood groaned low, as if it understood me. I went back to the library. I sat down in front of the laptop and opened the next video. David appeared smiling, showing a freshly painted wall. He said, "You'll see this one day, Maud, and I hope you understand that all of this was out of love, even if it seems like something else." I swallowed hard. That was our difference. He called love what I could only call absence. But even wounded, even rejected by the only living person I still had, a new feeling began to grow inside me. It wasn't anger, presence. For the first time, I felt that it was all mine now. My story, my journey. It wasn't going to sell anything. I wasn't going to close any doors. If David left me this labyrinth, I would go through to the end, alone, but standing, because something inside me, which had been dormant for a long time, was beginning to wake up. And this thing had a name. It was strength. I closed the video. I got up from my chair, and I went to the room where the safe was. I hadn't opened it yet. I still didn't have the courage. But now I needed to see what was inside, because something told me that between those iron walls was the answer I feared so much. Or the question that would change everything. I climbed each step of the attic with a heavy heart, as if my feet were being pulled by something old that I could not yet name. The wooden ladder creaked under my weight, and the air up there was different, denser, more charged, as if it kept memories that no one dared to touch. The wind was blowing outside, whistling through the cracks in the roof, and there was a strange sound coming from the back of the attic, a continuous rhythm, almost like a breath. And even so, I went. I walked past old boxes, stacked blankets, a rusty bike I didn't even know we had, until I saw him. In the corner of the back wall there was something covered with a red fabric, scarlet, intense, a red that seemed to pulsate in the middle of the dim light. I approached slowly, and for a moment I hesitated. I was afraid of what was behind it, but it was a different fear. Not something bad, but something that would make me see what I didn't want to see yet. I pulled the cloth carefully, and there it was, a painting. From me, but it was not like the floral paintings, nor like the soft portraits of the other rooms. It was me, crying, on her knees, in front of a burning house, my face twisted with pain, my hands on my chest, my eyes filled with something that seemed more than sadness. It was loss. It was desperation. The painting was so real, so full of emotion, that I took 2 steps back. I almost apologized for looking. It was as if I had invaded a part of myself that I didn't even know. Next to the frame, fastened with a rusty pin, was a note. The lyrics were David's, "For when you know everything." Nothing more. I folded the paper, put it in my pocket, and looked at the board again. And it was there, standing in that dark attic, in front of that brutal image of myself, that something inside me turned. Until then, I was the woman who discovered. Now, I would be the woman who deciphered. David didn't just leave me a secret. He built an emotional labyrinth. Every letter, every room, every object in this house. It was a play. He wanted me to see it, but only when he was no longer here, and as painful as it was, he entrusted me with this journey. So I decided, I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to sell anything. I'm going to stay, for as long as it takes. I will understand each layer of this story, in silence, with dignity, and with eyes that now no longer tremble. I came down from the attic and took a notebook. I started to write it down. Every name, every date, every symbol. I stopped acting like a lost widow, and I started acting like a woman who wants to know her own story to the end, because there are pains that become compasses, and there are silences that, if you listen carefully, show you exactly where to dig. I sat on the floor of the library with the notebook on my lap and the papers around it. I spent hours there, turning everything over. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. That night I didn't sleep in the master bedroom. Sleeping seemed impossible. But for the first time I didn't cry. For the first time, I didn't feel weak. I felt awake. And when I closed my eyes for a few minutes, there on the cold floor of the library, I saw myself again in the attic painting. But something was different. The house that burned. It wasn't just a memory. It was a warning. And maybe, perhaps what David wanted me to discover was closer than I imagined. Much closer. Because that morning, I heard footsteps upstairs. And it wasn't my imagination. The next morning, still with the echo of the footsteps of dawn circling my ears, I went downstairs to the dining room. The sun began to pass through the old window panes, drawing golden rectangles on the worn wooden floor. Everything was too calm, as if the house wanted to pretend that nothing happened. But I knew what I heard, and in that feigned silence, I decided to go deeper. There was something strange about the plinth of the old piece of furniture leaning against the wall, a slight difference in sound when I hit it with my knuckles. I knelt down, dragged the furniture with effort, and there, in an almost invisible corner of the floor, a board was loose. I stood up carefully. Inside, a small drawer embedded in the floor, and there, within it, an agenda, dark, worn leather, with the initials LDH in low relief. I opened it with careful hands. They were not appointments nor addresses. They were codes, initials such as L, CR, AV, MT, accompanied by dates, values, and notes that seemed to be written in a hurry. Delivery confirmed. Do not mention real name. Use pseudonym Legrand only. Trip to NY scheduled. I felt my stomach turn. I closed my diary, put on my coat, and went to the Middlebury Library. The city was small, with narrow streets and colonial mansions lined up like a painting. The library was in a red brick building, smelling of old wood and old coffee. There I met Ethan, a skinny, thick-eyed young man who looked at me curiously when I asked for help. "I need to do some searching," I said in a low voice. I showed him the agenda. He was immediately interested, and for hours we sat side by side, crossing names, researching archives of old newspapers, exhibition websites, art magazines. It was Ethan who found the first link. CR was Candace Reynolds, curator of an art gallery in New York. In 2015, she organized an exhibition called Invisible Fragments, with works by an unknown artist, Legrand. Legrand, that name comes up a lot here, Ethan commented. And it did. In several notes, discreet articles, sales at private auctions. A painting of it, my husband's, had sold for more than $60,000 in 2018. "Your husband was a secret artist, Mrs. Maud," Ethan said with a hesitant smile. I looked at the screen. To date, for the article, 60,000, without me knowing. He sold, hidden, and I thought we could barely afford to fix the garden fence. Ethan continued to help, patient, curious. With each new name deciphered, another piece emerged, another lie covered by silence. But by then, the pain no longer made me bend over. She straightened me up, because now it was personal. This story had a name, ink, smell, and value, and I wasn't going to walk in the dark anymore. I returned home at night with my schedule tight against my chest. I sat in the library chair and took a deep breath, and that's when I thought of something I need to share with you. There are stories that we don't choose to live. They fall into our lap like thunder, and we only have two options: to run away or follow it to the end. And if you've come this far with me, stay a little longer, because what's next? It's what changes everything. I went back to flipping through the agenda, and at the end of it, almost like a secret signature, was written, "She needs to know before the 12th. It was the 9th, but what would happen on the 12th? And who was she? Or rather, could this one? Was it me? That night, after a whole day reliving documents and clippings of a life that wasn't exactly mine, but that crossed me entirely, I decided to go back to the videos. There were so many not yet assisted, and a part of me feared what else I might find. But another part, quieter and more obstinate, knew it had to continue. I needed to get to the end, no matter what it hurts. I turned on the laptop, adjusted the headphones, and selected the 247 video. The title, unlike the others, came with an asterisk next to it. That alone made me cringe. The recording began without a track, without an introduction, a slight wheeze at first, and then the image appeared. The library. That same library where I'm now. But there, in the corner armchair, there was a woman. She must have been about 30 years old. Light skin, dark brown hair falling in waves down to her shoulders, a navy blue dress that seemed carefully chosen. And the hardest, she looked like Claire. The chin slightly curved, the shape of the eyebrows, even the way to arrange the strands behind the ear. For a moment, my body froze. "Mr. D, everything is as you requested," she said, looking directly at the camera. His voice was calm, intimate, but respectful. She called David Mr. D. David was never called that, at least not by me. The letters are still here, all stored, and she hasn't read it yet. I paused the video. The throat tightened, the chest in suspension. She hasn't read it yet. She who? I? Claire? That woman seemed to know about me. He knew of my existence, but he spoke like someone who observes from the outside, like someone who takes care of a secret, too fragile to be revealed. I rewound an excerpt and watched it again. She was not a mistress. I felt this in my chest. There was no desire in the way she spoke. It was something deeper, or more dangerous. Would it be a daughter? A daughter of David with another woman? Would it be possible that my Claire had a sister? Or would she be an assistant, a pupil, a shadow of what David didn't have the courage to tell me in life? I closed the laptop with shaky hands. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and stood there, staring at the emptiness. With each discovery, the feeling I had was that David had loved me. Yes, maybe even deeply, but on one condition: that I didn't know too much, as if his love was only possible in silence. But now the silence was full of voices, and I needed to listen to them all. You know, there are memories that we don't live, but that mark us anyway. Sometimes a speech, an image, a face, and suddenly you feel that a part of you has always known about it, even though you have never seen it. Have you ever been there? Ever had a borrowed memory? A strange feeling of déjà vu that you can't explain? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes the memory of a stranger is all we need to feel less alone. That night, I was in the clear. I turned my thoughts around. I turned my life upside down. The image of that woman haunted me like a question that didn't want to be answered. What if she is alive? What if it's closer than I imagine? What if all this? Are you connected to Claire? The letter in the safe, the painting in the attic, the annotations with dates, the New York exhibition. Everything revolved around an invisible line that I still couldn't connect, but it was there. She was alive. And the next morning, I received an anonymous envelope, tucked under the door. No sender, without a seal, just one sentence in front. You need to know her. Inside, there was an address. Brooklyn, New York. It's a name. Sophie. Sophie Reynolds. It took me 3 days to get the courage to call. The name Candace Reynolds still echoed like a strange bell inside me. It was as if he was connected to something I must remember, but my memory could not reach. In the agenda, next to the acronym CR, there was a cell phone number and an email address. I wrote a short, formal email. I signed on as Maude Winters. She did not say who I was, only that I was interested in the works of D. Legrand and wanted to talk about acquisitions. I was ignored for 2 days. In the third, I received a response. Hello, Maude. Can we quickly chat via video call? My time is tight, but Legrand's legacy deserves attention. Candace. I prepared myself as someone who is going to a trial. Hair up, light blue blouse, a scarf around my neck that David gave me in 2002, and that I never wore again. I sat in front of the laptop and took a deep breath before accepting the call. Candace appeared with effortless elegance. Gray hair slicked back, thin glasses, a background of tall bookshelves and modern works behind her. Maude? He said, smiling slightly. What a pleasure. It's my pleasure, Candace. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I'm always happy when someone is interested in Legrand. A rare soul, and suffered. I felt something lock in my chest. And how did you meet Legrand? Oh, that was in 2012. He came to me on the recommendation of a small circle of artists. I wanted to expose it, but in total secrecy. He never told me his real name. He always introduced himself as D, only D. Legrand. And the works? Strong, painful, but there was something about them, something personal, a broken heart that would not surrender. I said, You paint as if you're trying to redeem yourself with someone. She smiled nostalgically. And what did he say? Candace lowered her eyes. That everything he painted came from the pain of a woman he loved, but he didn't know how to protect. It was like taking a blow to the stomach. The woman, the pain. The phrase was repeated in my head. A woman he loved but didn't know how to protect. He said that, with these words? Yes, several times. My voice came out broken. Candace, I need to tell you who I am. She widened her eyes. I'm Maude. Maude Winters. Silence. She stood still for a few seconds. Oh my God. I was married to David. 24 years. He never told me about this other life. Candace put her hand to her mouth, visibly shaken. He was talking about you, but always with a mixture of love and guilt. He never mentioned his name. I only said that I had made mistakes, that he wanted to leave you something beautiful, something that explained without hurting. My breathing became heavy. The memories began to come back. The last night. David in the hospital, his hands shaking mine, his eyes filled with tears. Forgive me for everything I couldn't say. At the time, I thought he was talking about the disease, the fear of leaving. But now I understood. He already knew. He knew I would find out. He knew it was going to hurt me. But even so, left clues. He left the house. He left the keys. He left the paintings. Like someone who prepares the ground for someone who will arrive later. Candace was still looking at me in silence. I'm sorry, Maude. I really feel it. I thought you knew. No, I didn't know. She nodded respectfully. But now that you know, what will you do? I took a deep breath. I'll continue. Until the end. I hung up the call with teary eyes, but a firm heart. I went to the window. The Vermont sky was pale, like a leaf to be written. And there, leaning against the icy glass, I remembered something David said when we faced a storm together. "You're the most beautiful thing I've messed up." At the time, I thought it was just a poorly constructed metaphor. Today I know it was a request for forgiveness that he didn't know how to pack properly. No, there are certain phrases that stick in our souls, no matter how many years pass. Is there any that marked you like that too? A phrase, a memory, a feeling that never left? Share with me in the comments. Sometimes, reading the memory of the other is like finding a piece of ourselves again. I closed my eyes for a moment. David loved me. Of that, I was now sure. But it was a love, hidden, a love that was ashamed of itself. And there, in front of that new truth, I understood. I was not betrayed. I was hidden, like a jewel that he was afraid to expose to the light. And now I wanted to see everything, without a veil, without fear, because the next name on the list was Sophie Reynolds, and I would go to her, personally. The trip to Chicago was long, but not tiring. I was already used to the weight that accompanied me. The fatigue was now different. It came from within, that kind of wear and tear that only those who carry old silences understand. I called Claire on the way, said I wanted to see her. She accepted, somewhat reluctantly, with that practical tone that she always had. "Just don't delay, Mom. I have a meeting in the afternoon." We met in a cafe near her work, one of those places that were too modern, with white light and the smell of artificial cinnamon. Claire arrived in a hurry, beautiful as always, with her hair tied up and her eyes impatient. I approached slowly, trying not to look fragile. "Hi, Mom," she said, without smiling. I sat in front of her, and for a moment we were silent. It was strange. I've never been one of those mothers who talk like crazy, but that silence, it was different. "Claire, I need to ask you something. Honest." She frowned, annoyed. "It has to do with that house, right? That secret house." I nodded. "I went there." "Mom," she sighed, rolling her eyes. "I already told you. You need to stop it. You're romanticizing Daddy too much. He was never this figure full of mysteries. He was cold. That word cut me off. Cold. He was a closed man, Claire. But it wasn't cold. He hid the pain in a strange way." She smiled sideways, embarrassed. "Or maybe it hid a second life. The provocation hurt me, but I took a deep breath. I didn't come to fight. I came to understand. Claire, did you know that house? In Vermont?" She was silent. His eyes for a brief moment faltered. "No," he replied too quickly. "Of course not. Haven't you ever heard of a property called Crescent Pines?" She wieted the spoon in the coffee, avoiding my gaze. "No, Mom, never. But I saw it. I felt it." Her gaze was not one of denial. It was a defense. Claire knew something, and he didn't want to tell me. "Claire, there is a woman involved in all this. She appeared in a video recorded inside the house." She looked at me with a mixture of incredulity and anger. "You're really immersed in this, right? Are you watching old video as if it were a suspense movie? This is getting sick, Mom." I curled up in my chair. She continued, "Daddy cheated on you, that's it. He did everything in secret, as he always did. And there you are, creating a poetic story over the dirt. He was not a hero." I swallowed. "He was not a hero. But it wasn't the villain you want to paint either." She dropped the cup forcefully. "I have to go." "Claire," I insisted, feeling my whole body weigh down. "Do you know who Sophie Reynolds is?" The question fell like a bomb. She turned pale for a second. Just a second. "No, but it wasn't true. And I'm a mother. Mother recognizes when her son lies, even though he is 40 years old and wears expensive suits." "That's right," I said, standing up. "I won't insist." She looked at me, disconcerted. "Mom, it doesn't take it personally. It's just that it doesn't do you any good." I smiled with a sadness that I didn't even try to hide. "Sometimes, Claire, what you don't do well is pretending that the truth doesn't exist." I left the cafe without looking back. In the taxi back, I looked out the window and saw our story trickle between the tall buildings. Claire and I have always been different. She practices. I was silent. But now, there was a wall between us. A wall of unspoken pain. And it was there, on that worn leather seat, that I understood. This time, I was alone. Without David. Without Claire. Without anyone. Just me. And this story that insists on haunting me. But you know what? Perhaps this loneliness is the beginning of something. Perhaps now I am exactly where I should be, in front of the truth, without intermediaries. And I still had an address. Brooklyn. Sophie Reynolds. Was she the missing piece of this whole puzzle? Or will it be that she was the secret that David tried to show me all along? The calls began on a gray Thursday. I was in the garden, trying to prune the orchids that seemed to grow of their own accord, when the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered with a simple, hello, but on the other side, nothing. A dry silence, as if someone breathed, but did not have the courage to speak. I thought it was a mistake. But on the same afternoon, another call, and the next day, 2 more. In one, a man asked, "Are you responsible for the Crescent Pines property?" My skin crawled. "Who's talking?" I asked. But the call dropped. At first, I thought it was an unresolved inheritance thing. But on Saturday, I received a letter. There was no sender. It only said, "Those interested in buying the property in Vermont should respond by the end of the week." Attached, an official proposal. High, absurd, coming from a company called Norbridge Assets. Researched. The name was not strange to me. After rummaging through some of David's old papers, I found it. A contract from 2003, where he mentioned a certain Gerald Norbridge, former partner of an old venture. That was no coincidence. It was a message. Someone wanted the house. Someone knew I was discovering what I shouldn't. And above all, someone wanted me to stop. But I wasn't going to stop. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Sometimes sharing a piece of our pain is the only way to heal someone else's. I installed cameras, I locked gates, I changed the passwords. I called an old friend of David's who worked in digital security and asked for help, without even telling me the details. Deep in my soul, I began to feel a kind of gentle anger, the one that doesn't scream, but that doesn't back down either. They wanted to scare me. But those who went through a burial, a daughter's silence and a letter of confession, he no longer fears the dark. I continued reading the notebooks. David's diaries were hidden behind a fake shelf, and each page looked like a wet puzzle piece. Short sentences, scribbles, sometimes drawings. I wasn't strong enough. She was all I could protect. If it stayed away, the house will count. The house will show it. These phrases were repeated, but names also appeared. Dates. Sophie, noted 3 times. Brooklyn, circled in red, and a word that made me tremble. Transfer. In a diary from 2017, David mentioned, "Prevent the transfer from happening before Maud understands." What was this transfer? From the house, or something deeper? With each answer I found, a new question arose. And then there was Sophie, the woman in the video, the woman who knew about the letters. I needed to see her, but first, I needed to protect this place. Something told me that the house was not just a secret. It was a key, and someone wanted to break it. Did David foresee that they would try to stop me? Is that why he left everything so codified? And more, who, besides me, had the other pieces of this puzzle? I went down the stairs of the basement as if walking inside herself. Each step creaked in a way that reminded me of my knees. Tired, but still firm. There was something different in the air. A cold, steady breeze, as if a secret was blowing behind the walls. I grabbed the flashlight and started scanning the dust-covered shelves. Behind a piece of furniture leaning against it, I noticed an irregular cut in the concrete wall. I put my ear to it. Nothing. But when I hit my knuckles, it sounded hollow. The wall was fake. I pulled hard and felt the air change. It was like opening the door of a sacred tomb, not of death, but of memories. The room was small, but impeccably set up. Air-conditioned, silent, almost untouched. In the center, a glass bookcase with 12 objects. Not works of art, not papers. Simple objects. The silver leaf-shaped brooch I lost in 1999 while hiking in Ashland. The porcelain cup, cracked at the rim, from the hotel where we spent our honeymoon in Savannah. The lilac ribbon of the dress I wore when my father died. I hadn't seen that tape in over 30 years. David put it all away. Not for me. From me. Because I had forgotten. And no. I sat on the floor, in front of that shelf. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I only breathed with the weight of someone who is seen, even when she thinks she is invisible. There, in that silence, I understood that I was never a secret to him. I went. The center. David hid me from the world not out of shame, but out of sacredness. As someone who protects what is most precious from the touch of others, this does not forgive lies, but it reveals another layer of the story. And therein lies the justice that life sometimes gives us, not as a prize, but as a silent recognition. I stood up, still trembling, and noticed a metal box in the corner, a safe. I took the key that was stuck in one of the diaries. She entered effortlessly. Inside, I found yellowed but well-organized papers. A testament, not what the lawyer showed me months ago. Other, latest, signed, logged, and I left everything to myself. The house, the works, the copyright of the pseudonym, D. Legrand. There was a single note at the end, handwritten, in the handwriting that I would recognize even with my eyes closed. You were my only truth. I closed my eyes and felt the air in the basement as if it were the last breath of a story that waited a long time to be told. There are people who love screaming for the world to see, and there are people who love hiding everything in locked boxes. I don't know which love is more right, but I know which one belonged to me. And if you've been here so far, stay with me a little longer, because what's next changes everything. I went upstairs with the will in my hands. The house, which once seemed like an enigma to me, now seemed like an extension of my memory. But I still needed to understand one thing. Who was Sophie, and why did David think that only after his death would I be ready to know? The weeks following the discovery of the vault and the will were a mixture of incredulity and strange euphoria. Word that D. Legrand was not just any pseudonym, but David himself, began to spread through the art community and the small cultural circle of Middlebury and Vermont. Candace Reynolds, the New York curator I had met months earlier, quickly organized an exhibition dedicated to the complete collection, but this time, with my name emblazoned as the muse and central inspiration. Each painting, each object, each orchid recorded in David's diaries was exposed not only as a work, but as a narrative of love, dedication, and secrets protected over decades. The local press arrived with photographers and journalists, but something curious happened. No one asked about betrayal or scandal as I feared. They asked about the courage of a woman who discovered an entire life hidden by love, about the delicacy with which she received that legacy, and above all, about the silent story that the works told. I found myself in front of cameras, microphones, and reporters wanting to know what it was like to lose a husband, discover secrets, and still stand firm. I smiled, and something in me changed at that moment. The millionaire offer that a real estate fund linked to a former partner of David's had tried to present, publicly refused. I would not sell that legacy, that refuge, that testimony of life that David built and gave me. Every refusal was an act of respect for him, a silent affirmation that certain treasures are priceless. And it was then that I realized the unexpected side effect. Claire, my daughter, began to face public criticism for suggesting months ago that I sell everything. She was pressured, questioned, and I saw in her eyes the awareness that she had underestimated the force that ran in our family. David's partner, the same one who had tried to offer money to silence the story, had his connection to hidden transactions exposed. There were no shouts, there were no arrests, but there was an inevitable consequence. Loss of credibility, damaged reputation, disrupted business. The silent power of truth proved more devastating than any direct action of justice. And I, who for so many years felt small, invisible, betrayed and confused, felt safe. It was standing in the midst of the chaos, not as a victim, but as the guardian of all that was essential. During the opening of the exhibition, I walked through the halls with teary eyes, watching visitors stare at every painting, every detail, every trace that David had left. A brooch, a cup, a ribbon, little traces of our life together, were now silent witnesses that love can be deep, complex, and above all, resilient. The room was filled with murmurs of wonder, and I could feel every unseen story the spectators imagined. Some didn't just see paintings. They saw secrets, losses, reunions, and personal legacies that transcend generations. It was at that moment that I understood. David never wanted the whole world to know. He wanted me to know. And now, sharing this story with those who connected with art and emotion, I realized that it wasn't just about me or David. It was the story of anyone who has ever loved, lost, and found the strength to move on. As I strolled among the works, I looked at the painting of myself surrounded by orchids and felt a weight disappear from my shoulders. Every object in the basement, every note, every letter not sent, everything had been transformed into something greater. It was proof that life, even when full of secrets and silences, could create poetic justice in a subtle way, without screaming, without violence, just revealing the truth at the right time. And even though I knew that not everyone would understand, that some people could criticize or doubt, I knew that deep down, no one could touch what really mattered: love, memory, and the freedom to choose how to preserve or share. The art and souvenirs did not belong to third parties. They belonged to us, to David, and to me. As I gazed at the orchids and paintings, one phrase echoed in my mind: "You were my only truth." Now, I fully understood. It wasn't just a posthumous love message. It was the confirmation that even when betrayed or isolated, a person can emerge whole and transformed, guarding the essence of what is true. Every step I took in that space reinforced my own authority over my history, over my choices, over the legacy of an entire life that could not be bought, sold, or manipulated. The exhibition has become a meeting place for renowned critics, artists, and people in the community. But I realized something deeper. It wasn't just public recognition that I sought. It was the validation of one's own heart. Every silent compliment, every admiring look, every comment about David's sensitivity in creating that silent narrative made me feel alive and connected. I understood that justice does not always need courts, and that silence can be a more powerful weapon than any shout. And then one day, while arranging the last details of the exhibition with Candace, I received an unexpected call. It was Claire. She had changed. His voice carried hesitation and recognition. For the first time, there were no accusations, just a request for understanding. I listened. I felt the wound begin to heal, but I realized that part of the reconciliation was yet to come. Now, with the house intact, the art recognized and the truth revealed, I could breathe. But there was still something on the horizon, something that David had prepared and that I needed to fully understand. What else did he hide? That only now, with silent justice achieved, could be discovered. What I was about to find promised not only to close chapters, but to open new doors, doors of memories, revelations, and unexpected reconciliations. And even though I knew that what was coming could change everything again, I felt a quiet courage run through me. After all, I had learned from David that the truth, when protected and respected, always finds its moment to flourish. And so I wonder, what else would be hidden in the shadows of that house he so meticulously guarded? Did every corner, every object, contain more secrets waiting to transform my life again? Returning to Crescent Pines every day brought me a strange sense of peace and power. It wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary where every wall, every picture, every orchid told a story, and I was now its silent guardian. I decided not to sell the property, not to turn it into a museum, nor to exhibit it to the public. It was my space, my refuge, a place where I could finally breathe without external pressures, without having to prove anything to anyone. Every day, I sit by the fireplace or in my favorite chair by the window and write letters to David. They are not meant to be sent, but rather to keep alive the conversation we will never have again, and in a way, to keep my heart connected to it. With each letter I write, I also open one of the ones he left. Every word, every gesture captured in those pages reveals more of the man I thought I knew, but who, in fact, was always ahead of his time, planning every detail so that I could survive his absence with dignity and strength. I understand now that many of his secrets were not the result of mistrust or betrayal, but rather of care and protection. He knew my frailties, my insecurities, and planned a silent network of emotional safety so that I would never be helpless. At the same time, I realized that I also hid my own pains. I spent decades holding on to sadness and fears, often to not bother anyone, to appear strong, or just to survive the routine of everyday life. The house taught me that silence is not empty, but full of layers, stories, intentions and feelings that, when revealed, carry strength and clarity. Each day here is an opportunity to look inside myself and recognize the woman who survived silently, but who can now fully emerge. I also decided to resume painting, something I had long since put aside. At first, my hands trembled at the blank canvas, the heavy brush between my fingers, as if each color represented not only the paint, but also stored memories and repressed emotions. Gradually, confidence returns. I discover that, like David, I can also create worlds within the screens. I don't seek approval. I don't seek sales or external praise. My works now sit on the walls of Crescent Pines, mixed with the paintings he left, with the moments of our life frozen in art. Each brushstroke is a silent dialogue with David, an acknowledgement of the love and protection he has given me, and also an act of personal freedom. With each passing day, I feel that I understand more of the man he was. I understand your absences, your fears, your choices, and the depth of your silent love. But most of all, I understand myself, my strength, my ability to forgive, my creativity, my determination to preserve not only the house, but the memory and legacy he left. Crescent Pines is not just a refuge. It is the mirror of our lives, a place where past and present meet, where pain and love coexist, and where I can finally own myself, without mediators, without expectations from others, only with the truth of who we are. And as I watch the sunset illuminate the garden and the greenhouse full of carefully grown orchids, I realize that the emotional freedom David has left me is not measured in objects or money, but in the ability to decide how to live each day. I can laugh, cry, create, remember, and love, all at the same time, within a space that belongs to me and that breathes our memories. I finally understood that the greatest gift he could give me was not the house or financial security, but the autonomy to write my own story from now on, carrying everything we were together, but living fully without depending on anyone. And now, looking to the future, I feel that the story is not over yet. There's something in the air of Crescent Pines, a quiet mystery that seems to whisper that there are still revelations. There are still teachable moments, and perhaps new challenges. But I'm ready, not as the lost widow who arrived here, but as the woman who emerged from years of mourning, secrets and discoveries to finally become complete. The silence that once seemed heavy is now my most precious heritage, a space of contemplation, creation, and freedom. But even with all this silence and peace, one question keeps lingering in my mind. What else could have been planned, guarded, or hidden by David, waiting for the right moment to be revealed? Are there still secrets that he preserved, for me, for Claire, or perhaps for the world that would one day understand the depth of his vision? I feel that every shadow, every corner of this house still holds something that can transform the understanding of everything we live. The answer may come tomorrow, or perhaps in a decade, but I know one thing: I'm ready for any revelation, and Crescent Pines will always be my space of discovery and freedom. I sit in my favorite chair in Crescent Pines, the setting sun streaming through the curtains and softly illuminating my newly finished paintings. The house, now in complete silence, breathes along with me. Claire, although still emotionally distant, began to understand, little by little, that her father's story was not only his, but also ours, and that the truth, even belated, needed to be respected. Candace continues to take care of the exhibition of David's works, but now, with my consent, emphasizing our history and not just the artist's technique. The real estate fund and David's former partner disappeared from my worries. Their plans for control and greed have no place here anymore. I am at peace, not because everything has been explained, but because I have learned to trust in my own discernment and in the silent force of love that has been left to me. The great lesson I carry is that true love sometimes hides behind closed doors, silences and mysteries, but when revealed, it transforms our lives and teaches us that forgiving, understanding, and accepting are acts of courage and freedom. I understood that our own pains and secrets are not burdens to be carried alone, but paths to discover our strength and authenticity. And that's why I share my story with you, who accompany me here. If my words and experiences could touch your heart, a like is like a hug that warms and supports this channel, and the subscription is like an invitation to meet again in another cafe for more stories and reflections. Comment here which city you're watching me from. Let's create a small community of hearts that understand the beauty and pain of every secret revealed, every memory preserved. Also, activate the bell, so you don't miss it when the coffee is ironed again, and you can continue this conversation with me whenever you want. As I close another chapter of my life, I feel that the next story is already whispering in my ear, promising new stories, new lessons, and new emotions. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story. I was excluded from his story in life, but in the end, I found that I was the most important chapter.